You probably have a pretty solid grasp on internal and external validity after watching the related video, reading about them, and seeing examples. So the next step in truly understanding will be to apply them to consider the credibility of an article. I'll continue working with a study about slumped and upright postures for a demonstration of how you can think it through. Sometimes researchers do make direct statements about how the study controlled for threats to validity, but often it's like the population. We need to think about the meaning of the threat and what information we'd look for to know whether it was a concern or whether researchers did something to reduce the concern. Given that, it's helpful to start by thinking about which part of the article would include the related information. It might have already occurred to you that at least one of the parts of the method section relates to each of the threats to internal validity and to the concern for realism represented by external validity. Indeed, the method is the most relevant section. It can be helpful to think about the specific parts of the method too, like I did in the table in this slide. In addition, the results section sometimes includes information related to regression to the mean, while the discussion section sometimes includes information about the limitations of a study that relate to one or more of the threats to validity. Since our goal is to practice evaluating the credibility of a study, thinking about alternative explanations, identifying related questions, and understanding the meaning of results, I'm going to focus on the information in the method section because that can be easier to understand without giving us the answer, so to speak. Knowing about the meaning of each threat to validity helps us know what to look for as we skim the method section of an article. In another recording, I mentioned that the steps researchers can take to control the threats to validity and watching for information related to that also helps us identify relevant information. In the case of the slumped and upright postures article, the first thing I noticed was at the end of the first paragraph of the participants, the information about randomization. That's another way of saying that researchers used random assignment, which we know helps reduce threats due to selection. I kept skimming and found the information about a baseline questionnaire. In research, a baseline is used to provide comparison for other measures. So it means that the study measured variables more than once, which could be a threat to validity due to repeated testing and regression to the mean. In the next sentence, the information about the finger cuff reminded me that they used a physiological measure, which might create a potential for instrumentation effects. The information about using sealed envelopes seemed to be related to efforts to reduce researcher bias, but I didn't quite follow how that would work since the posture manipulation was so visible. The next paragraph described the manipulation, and after having thought about measurement validity, I know it's talking about the manipulation check, but it doesn't add anything about internal or external validity. So after reading the participants and the first two paragraphs of the procedure, my notes about potential threats to validity would look like the list on the right side of this slide. As I kept skimming, I saw the information that confirmed that they measured mood at least twice, and then in the next sentence, I realized they measured mood 3 times, and self-esteem and perceived threat were measured twice, which goes with what I had already noted about the baseline measure. Threats to experimental mortality, history, and maturation are all more likely for longer studies, so the information about how long participants were in the postures caught my attention. I don't think 30 minutes is particularly long though, and the participant section didn't mention any participants leaving, so I don't think we need to worry about those threats. I had to stop and think about the stress task for a little bit. On one hand, we know it was well validated, and that means the process has been found to be an effective way to cause stress. Yep, sometimes researchers do things that seem a little twisted, like stressing people out on purpose. That said, just because it can cause stress doesn't mean it's actually something that people do in real life, which is the concern of realism. This process was somewhat like a job interview, with a shopping voucher sort of like getting the job. But I'm not sure how often job interviews are videotaped, and they don't usually involve someone telling the person being interviewed how to sit. So it seems like the study has some strengths and some weaknesses, which I'll add to my notes. After I finished skimming the procedure, the prompts for the analysis helped me organize the information I found. Compiling the information in one place helped too. Having the notes about measurement, reliability, and validity in one document helped me realize that the physiological measures probably didn't have any instrumentation threats because the device that was used for the measurement had an internal calibration system. Thinking about external validity in terms of mundane realism and psychological realism also helped me separate my thoughts about the stress procedure and postural manipulation. The section about internal validity was relatively simple, so I'll let you review those notes.